What's up, you guys? It's me, B. Riley. Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in, and today we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to go ahead and start messing around with a couple of entry-level guitars that Fender has made over the years, including the newest Squier Sonic Mustang. And I think you guys are going to be surprised. I know I most certainly was when I opened it up and started taking a look at this thing. So let's go ahead and get to it, make some weird noises. And we've got two guest appearances by some of Fender's earlier iterations of their entry-level student model at a 24-inch scale length, a 1960 Duo Sonic that has been rattle can sprayed, and then our 1964 Fender Mustang that we just about 2 months ago did a refin and then a bit of aging on to kind of make it look a little bit more collectively together. Anyway, let's get to it. The first thing I notice about the new Sonic Mustang is that the radius edge is a little bit less rounded off than it's been in the past. Obviously in the 1960s we had a lot of contouring going into those beveled edges and things like that, but this one's not quite telly sharp, but it's pretty close. Single ply pick guard. You know, I've never been a fan of single ply pick guards. They always seem to be kind of the cry of a guilty heart when it comes to some of the cheap, more economically minded guitars. And we see that they've opted for just kind of a Strat style hardtail bridge with the strings coming in around the back of the bridge instead of through the body. So we have no ferrules on the back. You know, and one half of me is a little put off by the deviation on the bridge, you know, but it's tough when you're playing Mustangs and Jags and Jazzmasters live. There's a lot of little massaging you've got to do to the bridge and to the tailpiece to really get the thing to be friendly on stage. So that's kind of something that I can understand that being a bit of a concession. Now, as far as the fit and finish on this, the neck gap is extremely minimal. There's almost no gap in the neck pocket. And I find that funny because, you know, this is a Squier. It's a cheaper model. But it's got a much better neck pocket than you would typically see on most of the Made in America stuff from the 1970s or even the 1960s. That 1965 Jaguar that we restored last year had monumental amounts of space in between the neck and the actual neck pocket. This is actually really nice and tight. Good finish on the back of the neck, sanded finish, satin stuff, just a sealant that they sprayed over it. And this sealant is kind of nice because even though it's not quite as fetching or as pretty as some of the gloss coats that you get on the CV models, on the Classic Vibe 60s models, this is actually closer to the real deal. The finish on this neck, it is just a sealant and it's exceptionally thin, and that basically makes it almost an exact twin of that 1960 that's sitting over on the couch over there. They were finished very thin, so the back of the neck didn't break down the way they did in the late 60s and the 70s with kind of streaky grain showing. The whole finish would just disappear after the first couple years of use. Okay, so they've gone for a Duosonic style control, and I can get that. The slider switches are really difficult on the Mustang, and I know that they look the business, and it's great that you can, invert phase and things like that. But, when you're using them live, you have a tendency of grazing your fingertips on them, and if they haven't been rounded off, those things will cut you wide open. Also, the slider switches are very open to the elements, so the actual contacts have a propensity to get cluttered and contaminated, so you'll have scratchy switches and things like that. I've never had an old Fender come across my path with slider switches that didn't need a little bit of work to get it back onto its feet. Tuners on this are actually really nice. They're not very pretty because the ferrules are super huge. They're the screw-on type, the threaded type. 2 string trees. Single screen printed laminate up here. No water slide, no water decal. It's got a good profile. It's a little too strong on the shoulder, and I feel like the edge is a little too sharp. I had a Squier Jazzmaster about 10 years ago. The fret ends on that guitar were the worst I had ever seen. They looked almost deliberately sharp. They were lifting in multiple places. They weren't lined up. There were dead spots and buzzes and rattles everywhere. But on this guy, I can clearly see that we have a really good fret insertion here. It's nice and flat. There's no irregularities. They look consistent all the way across the board. And as I look up the top of the fretboard, the actual fret ends are dressed pretty nicely, and they're kind of rolled off a little bit. And you can actually see the marks where they dressed the frets. I can see because they didn't tape off the fretboard and they gave it a quick zap. But the fact that they had somebody sitting there with a file and actually dressing the frets is pretty huge, because 10 years ago, Squiers were coming across the line that looked great, but every once in a while you'd play one and it was just straight up painful to play. They've really stepped it up here. Now, unfortunately, it's a poly finish, and some people prefer poly, and if you do, then that's great. Not really my brand of tea. I feel like it kind of inhibits the guitar. I also feel like it fails to allow the guitar to kind of anthropomorphically develop. We get older and guitars get older. You're playing an old Les Paul from the 1950s and it might look as ragged as me on a Monday morning. But the thing is that, it's kind of steadily evolving. I always found it a little frustrating when you get guitars locked in plastic like this. I feel like it deprives them of some of their character. But that's just me. Everybody's got a different speed. Here's something interesting. We talked a couple months ago about the Road Warns having the skunk stripe problem, where it would delaminate and separate. This guitar cost me about $150 before shipping. And you want to know what? The neck on this is just a better quality. This skunk stripe has no deviations. It's nice and clean. The finish is good. The transition down to the headstock is nice and tidy. Like I said, the tuners are good. I mean, they're not the prettiest tuners ever, but they're sealed tuners and they work really, really well. So that's not too bad. I also noticed that they didn't give you, like a shoulder cut or a belly cut on this. So this is actually the reason why I wanted to compare it against the 64 and against the 60. And the reason is this, is that if you're picking up a Strat and the thing costs $1,000, you get confused. You can't compare it fairly to anything else in the Fender line. There's so much deviation in the product line right now that you don't really just have a Strat that they're making versus a Strat that they made 50 years ago. But when it comes to Duosonics and Mustangs, you actually kind of do. And the reason is this, is that granted the 1960 and the 64 have a more substantial monetary value because of their rarity, but the truth of it is that both of those guitars were never intended to be ornate or fantastic or even remarkable. They were kind of built to be, run-of-the-mill guitars. Each of these guitars started out its life as the absolute bargain basement, cheapest rung of Fender ownership. So while it would be easy to scoff at this Squier while it was sitting next to some old stuff like that that's wearing nitro and has been around for 50 or 60 years, really, in all honesty, those two guitars, as far as their fiduciary load, has only really contributed to the fact that they've just been made a heck of a lot earlier. The only real vice or sin that this thing can be guilty of is just coming along a little too late to the party to have enough time to get marked up. But for all intents and purposes, this is designed as an absolute bargain basement guitar. And in that way, this guitar has a lot in common with the 60 and the 64. Now, while everybody was going after Jazzmasters and Jags and all this stuff, that the Mustangs and the Duo Sonics sat at the bargain basement and were basically readily available for those kids who had slightly smaller hands, but large ambition. All right, guys, there you have it. Just kind of, I had a lot of fun with this this review because, you get to put them head to head like that. You could really start to pick apart the nuance and the tone and the differentiation and everything like that. So what's my overall summation on this thing? This is a great guitar. You should go out and buy one. I'm not joking. If you have watched any of my videos, you know, number one, I don't do product review unless I really want to see what it's looking like. But also another thing is I'm not going to tell you to buy something unless it's really, really solid. As a matter of fact, I don't remember ever advocating on this channel for you to go out and buy something. I will say this. Go out and buy a Sonic Mustang. They cost like $160. They're so cheap. And this thing is an excellent guitar for what it is. The fretwork is great. The neck feels good. It plays bright. It's willing. It'll shred a little bit. You can get pick squeals, but you can also get surf tones. It's just a great versatile little guitar where they took a couple of little trouble spots that the Mustang was kind of experiencing because of its complexity, slimmed it down a little bit, made it a little bit more utilitarian, and then went ahead and blew it out the front door for $150, $200. It's just a great guitar. Whatever the other guitars have got going for them is just something that they've accrued over time, and something that this guitar will also accrue over time. Just getting worn in, broken in, rounded off, getting a little bit more beat up. Because that's the thing, is that, the build quality is really only half the tone. The other half of the tone is coming out of what happens when the owners get it. Do they modify it? Do they play the hell out of it? Do the frets get really flat? Do the pickups go kind of dead, And all these small contributions kind of lean in and give you this oaky tone, that you hear very clearly in the 64. The fact of the matter is that the 23 is going to end up sounding like that. It's made out of the exact same materials with more young growth wood and stuff like that, so there's some concessions. But at the same time, those adversities are what's going to make that guitar interesting. Great guitar. really played great. Had a ton of fun playing that thing. Just an absolute blast. Had to stop myself, and that's half the reason that I didn't get the video done quick enough. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys dug the playing. I hope you guys dug the guitars. I love making these videos, and hopefully you guys like watching them a whole bunch. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you guys on Friday, and don't forget to, you know, plug in, get loud as heck, and when somebody comes over to complain about it, talk to them about music. See if you can turn them around on it. I'll see you guys on Friday.